Review of the Krieger HEMA messer. Hello there and welcome back to the Messer Fencing channel. My name is Oskar and today I will be reviewing the HEMA messer made by Krieger from Łódź in Poland. Now, before we start, this messer was sent to me with the idea that I'd be making a video review of it, but all of the opinions on this are my own. And furthermore, I have been using this for about 6 weeks now, doing a lot of different training sessions with it. I've been doing solo drills, technical drills, but mostly just a lot of sparring with a lot of different sparring partners, and those sparring partners were also wielding different types of messers against it. So, should you be getting a Krieger messer or not? I think yes. If you're looking for something that's durable, that's very light and will also keep you and your partner safe, then this is definitely it. So I can definitely recommend it. Why that is? Let's find out. So before I got this messer, I had a chat with the guys at Krieger about the design philosophy behind it. And what they told me is that they got in touch with the rest of the Polish HEMA community and asked them, hey, what are you looking for in a messer? And knowing Polish fencers a bit, they tend to not hold much back, not in training, especially not in tournaments. It needed to be very light so that you can use it for a long time without getting too tired. You need to be able to use it without it breaking down, so it had to be really tough. And finally, it also needs to keep you and your partner safe. And given those goals, I think that the guys at Krieger succeeded quite admirably in making a messer that fulfills them. Now, let's break this up into a couple of parameters. So I'll first be looking at just the pure specs, then I'll be looking at the aesthetics of this messer, then we get into interesting territory because we go to the handling and the safety, and finally the durability. So let's start with the specifications. I'll show them here. Now, looking at the standard specifications, I really couldn't find many discrepancies between those and the messer that I got. I think it's about 3 grams lighter overall, which is really not a big deal. So far so good. So let's quickly move on to the aesthetics. I think this is certainly not the prettiest blade. It's very utilitarian. And of course that's what you expect when you get a messer that's mostly geared towards sparring. It's certainly not ugly either. I mean, how can a messer ever be ugly? But it doesn't have any nice, fancy features. It's very simple. It's got a sturdy blade, simple cross, and a simple grip with a plastic grip scales. Now, the only true point of criticism I might have here is that the plastic scales are a bit wider than the tang is. Other than that, the plastic certainly doesn't look bad, and it really does help with sturdiness. So for aesthetics, it's certainly not the prettiest thing out there, but that doesn't really matter, does it, if you get a messer mostly geared towards sparring. And that brings me to the next point, the handling and the performance, and that's where stuff gets really interesting, because my word, this messer is light. It is about 750 grams. There's sharp originals that are heavier than that, and well, that really does matter a lot for how this messer handles. So there's a number of possible scenarios there, good, bad and ugly, and it really depends on what you're going to be using it for. Let's just start with the good. This messer is really well suited if you're mostly going to be using it for hard training and sparring. That's because it is so very light. It will not only keep your partner safe, which I'll be talking about later, but mostly it will keep you safe as well. It will allow you to train long without getting fatigued. And why does this matter? Well, what I find when putting a lot of gear on and then sparring with a messer is that it really annoys me not only how much more constricted my movement is, but it really annoys me that the way of gripping the messer and moving with the messer changes quite dramatically. Because if you have forearm protection and heavy gloves, you certainly have to clench the messer a lot harder often. That will lead to more fatigue and ultimately lead to potential injuries. Having a lighter messer really helps with that issue. So that's a very good point, it's a very good pro for this messer. So if you're going to be doing lots of hard training, a light messer like this is really going to help you a lot. Now, moving on to when it would be a bad idea to use this messer. What's bad about it? Well, it's certainly very good for sparring, but I wouldn't recommend it for learning how to fence. When you fence with the messer, you generally do not move from the wrist all that much. Making wrist cuts is not something that is a good idea. Not when you have a heavy training messer, but it also doesn't really show up in any of the manuals. Like, it really doesn't have that many wrist cuts, so to speak, and it's more reliant on making cuts from your shoulder and from your entire body. Now, of course, you can perfectly do this with this messer. I've done some very complicated, intricate stuff in sparring, and it worked perfectly fine. But if you do not yet know how to do those things, or if you do not have a good coach or instructor, this messer will not give you the feedback to tell you that you're doing it right. Because you can do all the nice technical stuff, but you can also just make really quick, snappy wrist cuts without knowing that this is probably not a good idea to do with a heavier messer. So that might be a bad idea. If you do not yet know how to fence well with a messer, then this might not be the messer that will teach you how to do that. And so that gets us to what you really shouldn't be using this messer for, and that's the ugly scenario, and that's really, you shouldn't be pairing this up against heavier or bigger blades than this one, and there's a couple of reasons for it. Mostly, this messer is very light and will allow you to hit a lot quicker and a lot more directly than heavier blades. So, for instance, I gave the Krieger to a clubmate of mine, and I took a heavier sparring and training blade myself, and what I found is that my clubmate was able to run circles around me. He's not a bad fencer, but he really was held quite a lot by the lighter blade. And I myself was faced with a choice then. Either let myself be hit, not learning much from that bout, or increase the speed, which is very dangerous if you have a heavy messer. It had a lot of potential for injuries, so I think that is really a bad idea and should be avoided at all costs. Now, to summarize the handling, if you're going to use this for a sparring messer or something to train stuff you already know how to do well, this is absolutely great. For other stuff, maybe not so much. Let's move on to safety, because I do think this is a very safe messer. What I found is, once again, the lightweight will allow you to hit your opponents with proper intent without necessarily hurting them. Messer fencing can be a bit dangerous, especially if you fence with someone who doesn't really know how to defend against certain angles or certain attacks. And with heavier blades, that becomes a problem because you do not have a second hand on the grip to stop a movement. Therefore, messers tend to hit quite hard. Having a lighter blade takes away a lot of that problems. And another thing I found is that I sometimes could really go for certain openings that I normally wouldn't have gone for because I know that would be dangerous. For instance, pushing a hand and then actually continuing the cut to the side of someone's head. I normally wouldn't do that. So when it comes to that, striking is very safe. Also, thrusting, there is flex in the blade. It's pretty decent actually. It's mostly through the entire blade, but we did find that a couple of really hard thrusts didn't really hurt my partners all that much. So that when it comes to safety, it's pretty good. What I also did do when it comes to safety is I asked my sparring partners for feedback on how they felt about the intensity of the fight and how they felt about the hardness of the hits. Quite often I had this conversation with my partners. They said, well, quite an intense fight, quite a hard fight, but the hits were not that hard. So that is really nice to hear, so you can really go to town with your sparring partners without necessarily hurting them, and that's a good thing. I really like this messer for that. Finally, when it comes to durability. Now, 6 weeks is a short period of time to really comment on the durability of a training tool, but I really haven't made any maintenance on it yet, and I can still run my hand down the blade like this very comfortably. So when it comes to burrs and edges, there's really not much going on. So that's very nice. Otherwise, the crossguard is still very much in place. The only thing is, if you go for the nagel like this, you might get a slight rattle. The grip is attached very securely. It does not budge. And we've dropped it on the ground a couple of times and there's no visible damage to the grip either. So this is some really sturdy stuff. you can, I think, really abuse this messer without feeling guilty about it. Now, will this hold up in a year or so? I don't know. I'll get back to that. But for now, for the past 6 weeks, it's been holding up pretty well, I'd say. And that really concludes my review. So, to summarize, is this a good messer? Yes, it is. It fills a role, and the role that it fills is a sparring messer or a messer for training really hard. It will allow you to keep training for a longer period of time in full gear. It will make sure your partners step away from that session without injuries, and it furthermore will allow you to go a lot faster and harder than you otherwise would have done. So that's very nice, and I think that the guys at Krieger made a good job doing that. Are you looking for a sparring messer? Then I would definitely recommend this. So, if you like this video, don't forget to leave a like under it and subscribe to my channel, and also press the bell button, do not forget that. Otherwise, stay safe, keep fencing, and I'll catch you in the next one.